Today we're doing ground beef, bean, and barley soup. And as the weather chills down or as the weather warms up, depending on which season you're in, having soup that you can have through the week is actually a really great thing. So even if you're only one person, this one's definitely worth making the whole recipe of. I've got a ½ pound of ground beef, and that's one of the nice things about this. As we see the cost of beef and pork and other meats going high, it's a nice way to reduce the amount and still get that flavor and texture that we all love with beef. What I've added to that, I've browned it just a little bit, and I've added ½ cup of onion. I'm also going to add ½ cup of chopped celery. And we're going to let those cook for just a little bit, let that onion become more translucent. Then we'll add a clove of garlic to it for just a quick time, and then we'll add pretty much everything else. While we're waiting for that to go ahead and soften, though, let's look for a minute at the barley. We are talking about a grain product. The kind of barley you choose to use is going to make a big difference on what you do as far as preparing this soup. The one I've got is a quick barley, which means it's pearled, which means it's not a whole grain. It's still really high in fiber, so it's still an excellent choice, but it's not the whole grain product that we're being encouraged to eat more of. If you choose, this one cooks in about 10 minutes. There's also pearled barley, which is going to take a little bit longer to cook, still not a whole grain. Or you can go with whole barley, which is going to take somewhere between 50 to 60 minutes. It's also harder to find, so unless you've got a source of it that's fairly handy, or you have some way to get a hold of it, and you also have a lot of time so that you can do that prep. Now, things like this are often things that we do on the weekend, so the time issue is often not so much, but finding it may be an issue in some of our small communities. I'm going to go ahead and add, I've got 1 clove of garlic that's been minced really well. And to that, I'm going to add a cup of crushed tomatoes. We're just going to put everything in here, and it's going to cook. We're going to let it cook for about 10 to 15 minutes. Also have a ½ cup of carrots that I've cut in moons. You could just slice it if you chose to. And also, I'm going to add 2 cups of dried red beans. Now this is to take the place, or the protein place, of some of that meat that we're reducing in this recipe. Also have a ½ teaspoon of dried basil, a bay leaf, and then I'm using 3/4 of a cup of the barley. Now this is something that's going to absorb a lot of water, so that's what we're using. I've got 7 cups of water that's going in here. Now because that barley is going to swell and absorb the water as this cooks, we're going to bring it to a simmer and put a lid on it and let it simmer for about 10 to 15 minutes, as I said, and then we're going to go ahead and add some more vegetables to this. So it's going to be a very nutritious recipe when we're done. I did start with a very lean beef. If you have started with a beef that's got a higher fat content, you may want to drain the fat off before you go ahead and add some of these other ingredients to it. You could also substitute other ground meats for it, or you could substitute other leftovers as well. Yeah, you could use something like a leftover pot roast, but you'd want to cut it up and then skip that browning stage and add it when the rest of the ingredients are added. Again, we're going to let this come to a boil, reduce it to a simmer, 10 to 15 minutes. You can see our soup is cooking up great down in here, and if I could pull up some barley, I would do so. You can see that it's substantially larger than it was before. What we're ready to do now is add more vegetables to it. So I've got a pound of frozen mixed vegetables, and one of the things I like about this soup is that it uses so many forms of food preservation. It has the canned beans, because I use canned kidney beans. It has fresh produce, it has frozen produce, and it has dried herbs. So if there's a way to preserve food other than freeze-dried, it's involved in this particular soup. I'm going to bring this back up to a boil and then turn it back down to a simmer and let it cook until those vegetables are done. And you can look at the label and find out about how long that's going to be. It's probably going to be somewhere between 10 to 15 minutes. If your mixed vegetables have lima beans in them, they're going to be on the longer end of the cook. Okay, our soup has cooked down. It's thickened up somewhat. You can see the barley is even bigger than it was when we checked it the last time before we put those other vegetables in. We are now ready to serve it up. The only thing that we need to remember to do as service is proceeding is to take that bay leaf out. Nobody should have to do that at the table themselves, and they can be harmful if you actually swallow one. So I hope you'll try this one. It's a great meal. Tastes even better the second day, and if you're a 1 or 2 person family, you can store it in the freezer and have it further on down the line than that. I hope you'll try it. Ground beef, bean, and barley soup. For Oklahoma Gardening, I'm Barbara Brown.